Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, James?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. What are we going to talk about today then?
Today, we are going to explore our relationship with failure.
Oh, I'm good on failure, I've had a lot of that.
Exactly. Me too. And so let's talk about failure, its importance in terms of learning, improvement, success, happiness. So we're going to explore that subject today.
Okay, very good. Right then. But before we do that,
Yep.
what have we been up to?
So I have been binge watching TV recently. It's no surprise. Now, contrary to popular belief, it's not Love Island, Below Deck, or any other trash TVs that I tend to watch. But I've got a recommendation for you for a decent program.
Oh, have you? Go on.
Slow Horses. It's a book that's been turned into a TV series. Gary Oldman, genius. He is absolutely incredible. He plays this grubby spy chief, and literally, I mean, the way he plays, you can smell him through the TV. It's horrible. And the other one is Yellowstone. The main character in Yellowstone, as far as I'm concerned, is the countryside. It's amazing. So there's two TV recommendations for you.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, the first one, Slow Horses, Mick Aaron. Yeah, I've read the book, mate.
You would. You're so much more intellectual. You've read the book, I've watched the TV show.
But no, if you took TV shows, if particularly people who live around Nottingham, you must watch Sherwood, which is the sort of thriller.
Oh, yeah, I watched the first series. There's another one out, isn't
The second one has got the scariest middle-aged woman I've ever come across in my entire life. And I know several scary middle-aged women, but it's just fantastic. So there's my recommendation. A bit of organised Nottingham crime. Right. So
Well, Nottingham is quite infamous for organised crime.
Yeah.
Shottingham, as it was first known when we moved here.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's any worse than any other city, is it, really?
Don't know. It was. There was regular shootings. I don't. Yeah, I don't think now. I don't think the crime rates.
No, I
meant to
think
be that
actually,
bad.
if I put my mind to it, I could go and get stabbed in any bar in Nottingham within about 20 minutes. It's not difficult.
That's more about you, James, than it does the bars in Nottingham. In fairness.
Right. So anyway, moving away from crime within Nottingham. Why are we talking about failure then? My experience here is the best thing to do with failure is sweep it under the carpet and keep it to yourself.
Exactly, and I think that's what we're all basically trained throughout our lives to do. But failure isn't a negative thing. When we were discussing this, we looked at it two ways. There's individual failure,
Yeah.
which enables you to learn. At the end of the day, if you don't try stuff out, if you don't fail at things, test things out, you can't learn. So that enables personal and professional success, in my view.
There's that dreadful American thing.
Go on.
Most American things are dreadful. I hope we haven't got any American listeners.
Well, we don't have now. We actually do have.
We've got about 3.
No,
yeah.
we do have American listeners.
Sorry, so anyone American listening to, I apologise for this. But there is no failure, there is only feedback.
The second area is organisationally.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of innovation is underpinned by failure.
No, all innovation is underpinned by failure, I would argue. Yeah.
No, that's true. I think we all have that relationship with failure, whether it's personally or professionally. Sweep it under the carpet, pretend it doesn't happen. It actually, we just said, it underpins your personal learning and it underpins innovation. And without those two things, you're a bit stuck.
I have a teenage daughter who just finished her GCSEs and she reacts really badly. She gets a test and she doesn't do well in a test. It's like the world's come round her head. But you're absolutely right. The whole point is to learn from it.
But that's partly, I think, the reason why we have a negative perception and a negative relationship with failure is because from a very young age, as soon as you get into education, you are taught there is a right answer and there is a wrong answer. And that's how you're educated. You're tested throughout your exams. Everything comes down to, did you answer that question right or wrong? So I think that relationship between right and wrong, success and failure, really does jaundice people's view into failure. And as a result, apart from sweeping under the carpet, we don't talk about it enough. So today we are going to talk about it a bit more, understanding it a little bit, and look at some of the psychology behind it and how we've experienced failure personally. What do you do about it?
All right. So you've done a wee bit of research, which is quite unlike you. So this must be a topic for you. Go on.
I know. Yeah, I did a little bit of research into the subject. One of the most well-renowned things on talking about failure is the work that Carol Dweck did, and the TED talk that she did on having a growth mindset.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's kind of go-to for a lot of people.
So what's that say then? I haven't seen that.
So basically, it's saying that
I was too busy reading the book. Smart.
Such a smart. But basically, it says that having a growth mindset, so being open to change and growing and failure and learning, is a huge stepping stone on improvement. And without failure, it's very hard to improve if you don't fail. Because the point is, you're never going to be completely perfect all the time. But people with that fixed mindset, who view failure as a real reflection on their ability, they don't learn from their mistakes. So even though they still make mistakes, they don't learn from them. So the research that she did really shows the importance of seeing failure as part of the learning process and the opportunity for growth.
And I am going to hash this now. However, isn't that the thing where you should never say to your kids, "You're really clever"? What you should say to your kids is, "Oh, you worked really hard." Because if you say you're really clever, then they think that's an innate capability. You can't get cleverer, whereas you can always work harder.
It becomes absolute in that instance, doesn't it?
But they did some work looking at it, and the kids that were told they were really clever actually didn't try new things for fear of failing at them.
Yeah. Well, if you're told you're really clever, you've done it a certain way, and you get that reward, you just carry on doing it the same way, don't you?
Yeah,
so that's you don't develop the growth mindset.
So quite limiting.
There's also a big piece of research around the emotional impact of failure, and a lot of studies.
Hang on, I'm going to enjoy this bit. Go on. By who?
Baumeister.
Very good.
Hey?
But you can't spell that.
I can, because I've got it written down in front of me. So the studies done by Baumeister, he looked at the emotional impact of failure and found that failure leads to feelings of shame, guilt and embarrassment. So as a result, we have a negativity bias towards this. If you think back to your early career, often things that went wrong sit more clearly with you than the things that went well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And then we touched on how failure supports innovation.
Yeah.
And actually there was some research done about organisational failure and success by Edmondson, and she looked at the psychological safety in organisations and found that where environments where failure was tolerated and it was seen as part of the innovation process, they're far more likely to succeed than organisations where you're not safe in terms of judgment. And we would have experienced this in terms of performance, where the downside of getting something wrong, in terms of the consequence, and I know you're itching to talk about performance management processes.
I'm not going to, but no, I'm not. We'll save that for another day. But no, you are absolutely right. And well, we've all had bosses who jump up and down on your head when you do things wrong, and if they do that, you don't get things wrong. No. And the easiest way to not get something wrong is not to try anything new.
If you think back to our days at Capital One, which was a credit card organisation that's big ethos was test and learn, and there was a lot of testing done.
Yeah, there was a huge amount,
without doubt. Yeah. But there was also a huge fear of failure and fear of doing things wrong and fear of being out of the ordinary, and the whole performance management processes that the organisation had really stifled a lot of difference, behaviours, diversity, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and then when we were talking about it being cultural, human cultural, but actually organisational cultural, I think that's massive in this. But we'll come on and talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. And the fear of failure has been studied extensively in psychology, And so if you're afraid of failure, you will absolutely reduce your efforts. So whilst you've got the situation I just described, where you want people to test and learn, and an innate part of testing and learning is failure, but at the same time, the culture is one that you would fear failure.
Yeah.
Performance is going to drop as a result of that. Because people avoid taking risks or taking on challenging stuff because they don't want to get things wrong.
Oh, and they lowball it, and they seen lots of that.
But I think the interesting thing is, on all of that research, a lot of it will chime with people, but intellectually we know the importance of trying things and failing and learning, but still practically we still shy away from it.
Well, go on then. So what has that meant to you personally then? So what's your actual experience? All right,
So I
talk
think-
about research, but what's your actual experience?
So I think there's a couple of things: personal failure and organisational attitudes to failure. So if you look at personal failure,
Yeah.
early in my career, I made a mistake. I made a judgment call and I made a mistake at work, and I was probably my very early 20s, and I was demoted, and I could have been sacked from that organisation, and that made me take a massive step back in my career. So I had a really, not a rough time in my early 20s, but in terms of my career, I got demoted and I went off and tried something new. I was on a successful career and I wanted to try something new, so I went off in my early 20s to try and be a pop star. Now, this strategy...
Hang on, have you got any musical ability?
Well, this strategy had a slight flaw in it.
Yeah, which was you don't have any musical
Absolutely.
ability.
Couldn't sing, couldn't dance, couldn't play any musical instruments, have absolutely zero musical talent. So between a combination of my lack of musical talent and getting demoted for making a mistake, my career took some really big setbacks.
I'd have been okay at that, mate, because I am a wild dancer.
In your head, you are a lot of things. In reality, sometimes they're slightly different. There's a difference between fear of failure and delusion. So, to me, failure feels horrible at the time, found it really difficult at the time. I felt like I'd let everyone down by not making a go of something, and everyone had faith in me and I made this mistake. But actually, I faced into both those situations. I dealt with them, I learned from them, and then in my later career, it really helped me. So I think there's a bit about personal failure, and then the second bit is organisationally. And I definitely in my early career was caught up in that everything's got to be perfect. You've got to get everything right all the time.
Yeah.
And then I learned and realised actually that's not reality.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many organisations try and get stuff right first time. I worked with an organisation who were dealing with 100 years worth of claims, and they were going to do it all via technology. Yet they didn't really test it in the right way to see if it would work. When they switched it on, it didn't work. So funny enough, the world came crashing.
Why didn't they test it?
Because I think that people sometimes take a very optimistic view of things. So it'll all be all right. I've seen lots of organisations go live with stuff that wasn't fit to go live with, or they get caught up in we've got to have this live on this time and this date, and you choose time over quality.
Yeah, it reminds me the whole TSB debacle when the banking system fell over. And everybody knew the thing was going to fall over, but nobody was prepared to tell the senior executive that it was going to fall over. And it's the whole fear of failure and the psychological safety thing.
The show you're listening to right now brings you insights to help you improve performance and enjoyment of work.
It takes a long time to produce, but we think it's well worth it. It's all in the name of helping you getting the job done well.
All we ask in return is that you share the link to this show with someone that you think would benefit from it. And if you haven't already, click on follow the show wherever you listen to this podcast right now. Anyway, let's get back to the show. How about you, James? What's your relationship been with failure?
It is more, I suppose, more of a systematic than a personal view. 35 years ago, I got a degree in genetics.
Yeah.
But genetics is all about evolution.
Yeah.
And evolution is all about trying lots of small things and seeing what works. Yes, evolution is all about failure. And you learn that, but that was part of my education, if you know what I mean. So it's part of my mindset because I had it banged into me so often.
And in fairness, I'd say that the generalisations we were making at the top, which is you had it banged into you in education that there's a right and a wrong, success and failure, are two polar opposites, one's good and one bad, which then sets you up to not embrace that through your life. And I guess your point of going up through that, studying evolution, that definitely helped you because, your attitude when we've worked together towards trying stuff out and experimentation was quite different from a lot of other
lot of people. And then my first proper job, I was a development manager.
Yeah.
And that's all about research and development. It's all about trying things. And so you'd laugh, but we used to make a load of chicken curry or whatever it is. But what you do is you'd start off with a new recipe in the kitchen and see if that worked. And if that worked, you move up to a pilot plan. And if that worked, you'd move up to a line trial. And you're gradually understanding what works and what doesn't. And by doing that, you gradually reduce risk and scale up. It was a bit of a shock for me moving from that environment, moving to work for a bank and an insurance company, because their failure was much more frowned upon. So you're right, I've always viewed it slightly differently, but it probably because, like I said, of that education and my first 10 years at work. But I don't think organisations on the whole realise how important it is. There's that thing you said the other day, was if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got.
Yeah.
So the only way to improve performance is to try something different, i.e. learn, see what happens if you do something different.
Yeah.
What a lot of people aren't prepared to face into the fact is that our workplaces are so complex that you can't possibly understand what's going to happen. So you've got to test your way in, and by definition, testing means failure. Because if you ain't got any failure, you ain't got any learning, and if you haven't got any learning, you haven't got any improvement. So it just is critical.
And we talk about life as if it's a linear journey.
Yeah.
You have to keep learning. I saw a really interesting interview of Lewis Hamilton recently, and he's probably the greatest motor racing driver of all time. But he said he learns constantly, and that's been his edge, is that throughout his career, no matter how good he's got, he's always believed that he could learn more.
Well, I'll take that. Another motor racing example is a lovely quote from Mario Andretti. And he said once, if you're not scared, then you're not driving fast enough. But that's the point. You've got to be trying new things if you really want to succeed.
And whilst we're on the quotes...
Oh, go on. You got another one?
I'll see your
You
Mario
take mine and you
Andretti.
raise me. Go on.
Rudyard Kipling.
Oh, okay.
If you can meet success and failure and treat them both as imposters, then you are a balanced man, my son. The point being, we don't, as people, treat success and failure in equal balance. So another recent example, though, is this podcast. We want to grow this podcast. Right? We shared some of the material, some of the content, and we've been trying lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're constantly coming up with new ideas, researching stuff, learning stuff, trying stuff.
See what works.
Some of it doesn't work.
A lot of it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But you don't know which bits are going to until you try it.
And it will grow when we keep finding the individual things. But one of the things that we've talked about is getting more feedback from our audience. And we get quite a bit of feedback. People often reach out, tell us what they like, what they don't like, what works well, ask us questions, ask for help. And that is invaluable because it allows us to learn. Now, that doesn't mean that everything we can do is perfect, but getting that feedback
really helps. Well, and that brings me on to the next thing. So, as you know, I'm a bit of a Deming fanboy, but he used to talk about the learning cycle, which was plan, do, check, act.
Yes.
Right? Now, what is that all about? So the first thing is, see something, have a plan, decide you want something doesn't quite look right, create a plan. How are you going to test something? Yeah. Then you run a test, you do the do.
Yeah.
But then the most important thing is the check. So get the feedback. See, well, did that work the way I expected it to work or not? And if it did, then you go one way. And if it didn't, you go the other way, which is the act bit. But the most important bit of that really is the checking, getting the feedback and understanding.
Yeah, because back to our podcast, unless we get feedback on what's working and what's not, and that can be people telling us, or it can be seeing the downloads improve, you don't really know. But organisations often just do the first bit, plan, do.
Yeah, plan, do.
That's
Absolutely.
it. So I think organisationally, thinking a bit more broadly about, have you got, back to the research, the psychological safety for people to check back and then adjust their course of action?
There's an interesting thing here, right? Because on the one hand, you say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you should be rewarding failures?
Yeah.
But there's a really difficult cultural bit in here, right?
Right.
Because most organisations, they'll reward success. If somebody does something good, get a slap on the back and a bonus.
Yeah.
But actually, rewarding success is a fool's errand, because if you reward success, then people won't try stuff.
No.
But then that gets you to a point where you're saying, well, should you be rewarding failure then?
And should you?
Well, you try and get that past your HR director, right? So no, you shouldn't be rewarding failure. So then, all right, so you can't reward success and you can't reward failure. What the hell should you do? There's a guy called Bob Sutton, and his recommendation was really quite cute. Is what you should do is you should reward the number of tests and trials.
Right.
Because the more people test and try things, the more likely they are to be successful. And they'll get some failures and they'll get some successes. But the key determinant actually is how many different things you tried. So there's a thought for you. Reward tests.
And I think the other thing about tests is, as you bang on about, it's being really clear on how you structure your tests within your organisation. So don't just, to the point I was making earlier, let's just do a test and then
Throw
roll
something
it
at
out.
the wall and keep going. Yeah.
It's how you clear on your hypothesis. How do you clear on how you measure the text? What success looks like? How do you compare it? How do you not just, because I want this to be the right answer, therefore I'm going to go live with this. It's how do you not let that optimism creep in and actually really structure your test and learn correctly.
Yeah.
And I've got a great example of, not organisation, but personally, where I haven't done that.
Go on.
I take so many vitamins and supplements, I must rattle. Right?
You look great on it, though.
I
You're
do.
positively glowing in front of me. Do you remember those Ready Brek adverts in the 1980s?
I'm like Benjamin Button.
Yeah, okay.
But do I know which one of the 11 supplements works? I have not got the first clue, because I keep taking and not testing them, not learning, so I just pile on and pile on and pile on. And that's what organisations do. And so, funny enough, I can't tell which supplements work. A lot of time, organisations can't tell you what levers they're pulling and what the result is of those levers.
Well, absolutely. And then you get things baked into the way we do business, which are just madness. Nobody's got any idea if they're working at all or not. But it just becomes organisational waste.
Yeah. I heard another really great quote as well, which I think you'll like. A lot of organisations out of Silicon Valley do embrace failure really well.
Yeah.
And they do have cultures where failure and innovation and learning are well embraced and well accepted. But one of the things they talk about is failing fast. So when you're going to test something, don't just keep flogging it and flogging it. There's a Japanese saying, if you get on the wrong train, get off at the nearest station. The longer it takes you to get off, the more expensive the return trip will be. So don't spend a load of time on it, even though you want it to be the right answer. Just accept it's not, learn from it, change tack.
Yeah, but we all fall into it. I did a piece of work once. We ran out of program and I couldn't prove it was working. And so I had this analyst who used to work for me, a chap called Pete. If you're listening, Pete, hello, Pete. And Pete was a very capable guy, right? He cut it this way, he cut it that way, he did this regression, he did that regression, random forest, the whole 9 yards, everything he could look at it. And eventually he came to me and he said, James, at what point are we going to admit this isn't working? But there's the point, You get tied into these things. If you can't admit they're not working, then you won't stop them, and then you just keep going down that rabbit hole.
So we've shared some of the research to do with failure and the fear of failure. We've shared some of our personal perspectives. We've shared some of the things that you can do personally around how you think about failure, how you embrace it, and organisationally some of the things that you can do. So where does that take us?
I I think the first thing really is you have to be able to sort of unlock that tension between what you know to be right and what you feel, what you believe. Because it's only when you can get over the emotional resistance to failure that you'll start to have a go, try new things.
And ultimately, failure does underpin learning, innovation, improvement, and growth. So it's a pretty important thing to get to grips with.
And as I said, when I was a development manager, development being improvement, you ran tests. It was just inherent to it. So that's what you need to do. I think the final thing for me, though, is just if you want to go and learn more, there's loads on the internet you can look at. Go and look at the Carol Dweck TED Talk, easy for me to say. And also the other thing you really ought to do is Google Deming and look at the learning cycle, because it's a bit 1980s, but it really explain what you need to be thinking about.
So we have shared some of our insights, how personally and professionally we've really embraced the power of failure. So hopefully you found that useful. If you would like to discuss failure, or if you want to give us more feedback on
which would be very helpful,
podcast, which helps us in our learning journey as podcasters, then please feel free to get in touch.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Speak to you later. We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
from purpose to corporate jargon,
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
if your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiralling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com
or james@ajobdonewell.com.